I was thanking the organizers. They had requested me for something like a keynote address, giving me the purpose of this seminar. I started finding some key. Without the key, we have no keynote. And without the keynote, we have no keynote address. But fortunately, and a great privilege is there, that we are holding it here and referring to the vision of Sri Aurobindo. Thus, turning to Sri Aurobindo became a privilege, became an occasion, and the result is something which is not like a keynote address. I started feeling as if turning to Sri Aurobindo for India, for India's future, India's renaissance, and Sanskrit. Each one of these three terms, each one of these three terms opened very sedated vistas for study, for contemplation, for work, and for going deeper and still deeper. And I felt as if turning to Sri Aurobindo is to turn into an ocean, move into an ocean, and you start getting drowned and there is no possibility of channelizing the ocean. The ocean cannot be channelized. Still, the seminar has to be a seminar. And if somebody is asked to perform a particular responsibility, one must do it. Still, something that is really Indian in me particularly is that I look upon a seminar as something like a goshti, as something like a Vichari. And whatever we are able to see and receive and feel and think out has to be offered. In that way, my mind moved to Sanskrit, to India, to its future, its development, the India's dharma by way of Swadharma, and the future, and all in the light of Sri Aurobindo. Thus, a great scope opens before us, for all of us. Coming to Sanskrit, I feel it is not just a language. There are languages and languages and languages in the world, and every language has its own history, its own evolution, its own grammar, its own vocabulary. Sanskrit is not merely that. Sanskrit is not merely a word stock and a structure and a grammar and a means of communication. Sanskrit creates, recreates. And when we turn to those terms which are very, very traditional to us, we have a full scope to contemplate. Why should we call it Deva Bhasha? One question. It is Deva Bhasha, but it is not merely a sentiment. There is a great truth in it. There seems to be something like a process that is in two ways working. A coming down, something coming down from above, something emerging and redefining itself and perfecting itself from below. There are two processes in that language, this language that we can see. We hear that the ancients, the rishis, saw the language. I can't imagine that they saw a script. Seeing a language Hearing a language is understandable. Seeing a language, not very simple. Yet, when we turn to the words kavi as darshana, when we look to the terms richa as seeing, when we come to the word rishi, and also the scholarship in Sanskrit has shown to us that what we call Sanskrit language and what we call language, or more precisely what we call speech, which results into language, is very profound a study. It is only in Sanskrit heritage that we have planes and planes of language. Para, Pashyanti, Madhyama, Vaikari. We don't have this in any language. And when we start looking at it, we are amazed. And unless really we wake up to all the significance of it, we cannot proceed with Sanskrit as we have to proceed with Sanskrit. Para, we call it Vak. But come to speech. Speech becomes speech to the common man only when it is spoken out. Before that it is not speech. So therefore we can say that in terms of Sanskrit, Vaikari should be only speech. But Vaikari is the last expression of speech. In our own tradition, Vaikari is the last manifestation, the last expression. Before that is Madhyama, still before is Pashyanti, and the word Pashyanti again invites language seeing. Also, turn to our Varnamala. The word Varnamala itself refers to something seen and not heard. Varna is a hue, something that can be seen, a shade. And that way, there are terms and terms which we come across in the study of language, our own Sanskrit language, which invites us to a very deep study as to what we mean by Sanskrit. And not only this, that Sanskrit is what has been done already. Sanskrit renews itself. It recreates itself. It grows on and it evolves and further evolves. And the word Sanskrit itself invites. When we come to the word Sanskrit, it does not refer to any geography. It doesn't refer to any community. It doesn't refer to any class of people or any race. Sanskrit. Naturally, Sanskrit has to be the language of the Sanskrit. People have to be Sanskrit, consciousness has to be Sanskrit, language has to be Sanskrit, and this Sanskrit is not something like finishing up a product. It goes on and grows on. Therefore, it is to move to the vitality that Sanskrit has and has been having, and it is only because of that vitality that Sanskrit has for thousands of years that we have to turn to the term India, its future, its resurgence, and Sanskrit. They cannot be separated. The term Sanskrit, the language Sanskrit cannot be separated from India. India cannot be separated from its culture. Culture cannot be separated from its spirituality. Its spirituality cannot be separated from Sanskrit. It is so one. And this would be perhaps one of the very important things in which people, individually or institutionally, can engage themselves into the study of the rules. We have Shastras and Shastras and Shastras. But there are certain things which are very, very spiritual, and this I am speaking in the right of Srila Vaidehi. Maybe I read out a passage from Srila Vaidehi. This is with you. Page number 4. There is a passage of Sri. The ancient and classical creations of Sanskrit tongue, both in quality and in body, and abundance of excellence, in their potent originality and force and beauty, in their substance and art and structure, in grandeur and justice and charm of speech, and the height and width of the reach of their spirit stand very evidently in the front rank among the world's great literatures. I don't read the whole bit, you can read it. I would say each word of Sri Aurobindo here sets us to meditate. We can really enter into each one of these terms being spoken about Sanskrit and see the truth of it. Now, naturally, we can't just see it by reading. We have to be acquainted, we have to go deep, we have to dive, as it were, into the beauty and the grandeur of Sanskrit language, then only we shall be able to see. This is one of the passages like that we have in abundance. Coming to India, again, as Sanskrit is not just a language, India is not just a country. In modern times, most often we look upon India as one of the countries among many other countries. And when we speak of development of countries, then the modern man speaks of developed countries and developing countries and underdeveloped countries and undeveloped countries, etc., etc. And they put India somewhere. Really speaking, India is not just a land, not just a present population. It's a long history of achievement. It's a long consciousness in striving. It's a long consciousness in seeing and achieving and realizing. Unless, therefore, we move to the spirit of India and it uses the word India's soul. We use the word Bharat Mata. Well, it's not just an epithet. It's not just a formality. It's not merely a sentiment. It's a truth that we have to enter into. When therefore we come to India, as Sri Aurobindo puts it, India, he speaks of India as God's chosen country. God chooses some country for it. For conducting history, well, I'll not go into this. This India itself is a manifestation, is a Shakti. It's not merely a present government and a present economy and a present technology, etc. When we speak of development, quite often we think in economic terms, industry and power and money and all that. But what would be the meaning of the development of India? What would be the meaning of it? The present terms will not work. Sri Aurobindo helps us. And he speaks very clearly that India has to recover her soul. That is the development. I read out, and that's a little bigger passage, but then I'm tempted to read the whole. This will give a whole policy about India's programs of development. The first sentence I have put at the top. India can best develop herself and serve humanity by being herself. The top itself I have put it. I read the whole passage. India can best develop itself and serve humanity by being herself, by following the law of coordination. This does not mean, as some narrowly and blindly suppose, the rejection of everything new that comes to us in the stream of time, or happens to have been first developed or powerfully expressed by the West. Such an attitude would be intellectually absurd, physically impossible, and above all, unspiritual. This is very important. Srivastava would put it as unspiritual. True spirituality rejects no new light, no added means or materials of our human self-development. It means simply to keep our center, our essential way of being, our inborn nature, and assimilate to it all we receive. The word is assimilate. It's not just adding, it's not just adopting, it is not merely making a compromise between the West and the Indian and the Indian. It is something very, very different. It has to be assimilated, and it has to be subordinated, and it has to be used, not just somehow adopted. It means simply to keep our center, our essential way of being, our inborn nature, and assimilate to it all we receive, and evolve out of it all we do and create. Religion has been a central preoccupation of Indian mind. Some have told us that too much religion ruined India, precisely because we made the whole of life religion, or religion the whole of life. We have failed in life and gone and gone under some comments by moderns, Indians and non-Indians both. They speak about religion and they say India's past has been mostly religious and religion was too much in it, and therefore we have undergone certain paintings. Sri Aurobindo says, I will not answer. I will not answer adopting the language used by the poet in a slightly different connection, that our fall does not matter and that the dust in which India lies is sacred. He is referring to somebody's response to this. The fall, the failure does matter, and to lie in the dust is no sound position for man or nation. But the reason assigned is not the true one. If the majority of Indians had indeed made the whole of their lives religion, in the true sense of the word, we should not be where we are now. It was because their public life became most irreligious, egoistic, self-seeking, materialistic that they fell. It is possible that on one side we deviated too much into an excessive religiosity, that is to say, an excessive externalism of ceremony, rule, routine, mechanical worship, on the other, into a too world-shunning asceticism which drew away the best minds who were thus lost to society instead of standing like the ancient rishis as the spiritual support and its illuminating light givers. But the root of the matter was the dwindling of the spiritual impulse in its generality and broadness, the decline of intellectual activity and freedom, the waning of great ideas, the loss of gust of life. Perhaps there was too much of religion in verses. The word in English smacks too much of things external, such as creeds, rites, external piety. There is no one Indian equivalent. We deserve to be attentive that we are using the word religion and the dharma as synonymous. writing of Sri Aurobindo, it's very, very clear that we do not have any synonym for religion, nor is there any English synonym for dharma. The parts of the divinized possible values, divinest possible values, then it is evident that there was not too much of religion, but rather too little. So even if we take it as the age-long ideal of India, but to return to its own amplitude and give it a still wider scope to make in every truth all the life of the nation a religion. In this high spiritual sense, this is the direction in which the philosophy, poetry, art of the West are beginning now to fall across political and sociological ideals. India has the key. India has the key to the knowledge and to protect the outer growth of the spiritual ideal, and which afterwards became barriers to its expansion and further application will rise or not in the height of opportunity is in the Renaissance, which is coming upon her, is a question of her destiny. He has spoken in detail that spirituality in India is not one-sided. We have to take a new birth, and it has to be centrally spiritual. But spirituality is not evolutionary. He speaks as where there is a quotation, I'll not read it, that there are three things to be done in our re-awakening. One is to recover our soul. The other is to turn all our knowledge, our sciences, philosophy, art, all our knowledge in such a way that it receives the light of spirituality. There is a third program, and that is to deal with life, the outer life, our economy, our politics, our practical fields, our exercise, our education. All these have to be reorganized spiritually speaking. This is, and about the third program, we say it is the most difficult. It would be difficult naturally. But it is something in India itself there are confusions, and we have to be very careful about these terms, and we have to study for ourselves. Then coming to the development of India. India's development is for a new age. When we speak of India and speak of India's spirituality, often our mind moves to the past. Oh, we have the Veda, we have the Upanishads, we have the Gita, we have Ramayana and Mahabharata, and we have the literature of Kalidas, and we have all that. All that. This is the past. Is our greatness confined to the past? Or our greatness has to prepare us for a still greater greatness? This would be a question. We are speaking of the future. Sri Aurobindo speaks in a very simple language. The past is our foundation. The present, our material. The future, our aim and summit. So the spiritual vision that Sri Aurobindo gives to us is not only for samadhi, is not only for moksha, not only for spirituality, not only for yoga, but for taking up the whole of human existence, social, political, practical, even technological. All this has to be taken up and given a new dimension, given a new charge, given a new form, and given such a thing that the whole world can, in due course, turn to India's spirituality. My mother has very clearly spoken. The destiny of India, the true destiny of India is to be the spiritual guru of the world. Very simple language. The true destiny of India is to be the spiritual guru of the world. So it does not mean that we prepare gurus here and we can receive dollars from outside. I mean, we export gurus from here, and it is something very, very important that we turn to. We have to recover our soul. That is to be the thing. Well, in this recovery, is recovery of sustenance also necessarily included. Recovery of spirituality, recovery even of religion. Sometimes people speak a little cynically about religion, not knowing what true religion really means. Religion has been central to India. In one of Sri Aurobindo's own speech that was given at Uttarpada, he said, and those were the days when nationalism was of a most important occupation for Indians, and Sri Aurobindo himself was supposed to be a great nationalist. And his language was, nationalism is religion. Later on he says, I said it, nationalism is our religion. I say the same thing a little differently today. And then he enters into what he means by religion. He names it as Sanatana Dharma. Our religion is Sanatana Dharma. It is not this or that denomination of religion. It is not this or that ism. Sanatana Dharma. And then he concludes the speech, I say it in a different way. Sanatana Dharma is our national dharma. He says, I said nationalism is our dharma. Now I say Sanatana Dharma is our nationalism. That means to be ourselves, to become ourselves. And this sentence, India can best develop herself by being herself. This being herself contains all the, I would say it's a mantric invitation. Being herself and following the law of her own nature, her Swadharma. I think this much would do as far as my invitation. I said it's not an keynote address, it's an invitation letter. Please take it as an invitation letter, and this will help us to turn to India, to Sanskrit, to Sri Aurobindo. Thank you.